Hello and welcome back to Lesson 3 of Module 1 on Diet, Talking Nutrition. This one is my favorite lesson, really hitting some very practical food quality information, plus what do we mean by nutrient density. So far we've looked at the history side of nutrition and the biblical framework, touched on the science and the actual nutrients, a little bit of label reading, and now we're hitting the types of foods. What do we mean by healthy ingredients? What do we mean by nutrient density? There's really 3 levels of nutrition. Level 1 is just basic whole foods, just transitioning off of a lot of processed foods that are so readily available in our modern country and culture. So level 1 is just whole foods. Let's just eat the chicken itself. Let's just eat apples and carrots and celery. Let's just eat sprouted grains. Whole food butter versus margarine or manufactured spreads. It's the whole food. And let me say here, processing in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean it's unhealthy. Humans have been processing food for generations and generations. It's really more of how they're processed. So historically, cultures would beat grapes. They would sprout or ferment or sour grains to make bread. The Israelites coming out of the nation of Egypt on the Exodus, it says in the scripture that their bread did not even have time to rise in their kneading bowls. What does that mean? They're souring their dough. They're naturally fermenting natural yeast from the air, pulling that into the bread. That's a process. And then they bake the bread. That's a process. But it's not so much the processing as it is how those processes and what kind of processes are we talking about. Then level 2 is nutrient density, building nutrient dense meals. What do those nutrient dense foods look like and how do we build meals from them? And level 3 is therapeutic, actually using food as medicine. In what our coaching services provide, all 3 levels of this nutrition. So if someone's I just need to transition off processed foods and eat more whole foods. Great. I just need to add more nutrient density to my meals that I'm doing already, primarily whole foods. I'm actually really struggling with navigating a health condition. How do I use food as medicine on a therapeutic level? So 3 levels of nutrition. No matter what level you're on or what level you need at your current health profile, there's answers in nutrition for all of it. So making it simple, whole foods for the whole person. Here's the top 5, and there's plenty more, but to make it really simple, top 5 food additives that you want to either limit as much as you can or avoid altogether. Hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oils. GMOs, corn, soy, canola, cottonseed, high fructose corn syrup. That's huge. If we're just cutting just that out of our diets, that'll make a big impact. Monosodium glutamate, MSG, and food dyes or artificial colors. So eating whole foods, an apple, carrot, celery, chicken, egg, things on the outside of the aisles, basically, of the grocery store, you're going to kind of by default eliminate a lot of these negative food additives. Okay, here we go, making it super practical. Now we're getting from nutrients and ingredients down to the actual food itself. So we have the next few slides highlighting worst to best scale for some main foods. So worst to best is really determined by how far removed from its natural design a food is. So let's take eggs for example. There's so many labels in the store for eggs nowadays. They're free range, they're cage free, they're organic, they're pastured. It actually cracks me up. Pun intended. There's so many labels, so many choices. How do you know which one to pick? So worst to best. If you're used to eating, number 1, the worst, conventional, just know you're getting hormones, you're getting GMO feed, you're getting all kinds of additives to what the chicken is fed to make that egg less and less and less nutritious and removed from its natural design. Moving up the ladder to cage-free is a little bit better. Cage-free just simply means that they're able to roam around inside a chicken house. They're not cooped up in single confined cages like number 1, conventional raised chickens. Then number 3, moving up the value, they're free range, which simply means they're cage free. They can roam around in a chicken house but they also have access to the outside. Whether that chicken that you ate the egg from went outside and ate grass and bugs, what it's naturally designed to eat, or not, we don't know, but at least it's given the opportunity. That's what free range means. And then organic means that whether it's cage-free or free-range, organic just simply means they're not fed any genetically modified foods. So those chickens are eating very clean, and the result of that will impact the nutrition of the egg itself. And the very best type of egg you can buy, and you're starting to see more and more just regular grocery store chains carry pastured, what's called pastured eggs. Those are the absolute best because those chickens are raised outside on pasture in usually mobile chicken houses that can move around. They peck on the ground, get the bugs and the grass and the nutrition from the soil even. That type of egg is going to be the most nutritious because that's how chickens are designed. So when we see sometimes on a food label of eggs, especially vegetarian fed, we think, oh, that's probably pretty healthy. Well, chickens really aren't vegetarian. They're not designed to eat only plants. They actually eat bugs and worms and other things that are not plants. So knowing what the food label says and on the worst to best, start making your transition, maybe even just bump it up to the very next level. Worst to best scale for dairy. So how far? Dairy is probably one of the most removed foods from its natural state that we have in our grocery store modernized today. So when it comes out of the cow, that's the whole food. It has full fat, it has all its enzymes, it has all the nutrition, everything it needs for the body to be able to digest it. So the worst is really pasteurized, homogenized. Pasteurized meaning it's heated so high that all the enzymes are killed. But it's also, the thought is, or the theory is, killing all the bad bacteria as well, right? And it's homogenized, meaning the fat is broken up and separated in such small molecules that it doesn't rise to the top. It can coagulate and rise to the top. And then sometimes we even take the fat out completely, which then you lose all the vitamin D, because vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. So vitamin D is not able to function as much in the body if we're drinking. So the worst is really skim, no fat, pasteurized and homogenized. It's the farthest removed from its natural design. So the next step is pasteurized, homogenized, organic, whole milk. At least you have the fat back in it. At least the cows weren't fed GMO. It's still pasteurized, still homogenized. Next level up, grass-fed. So the cows are fed grass, pasteurized, homogenized, organic, whole. The next level up, grass-fed, pasteurized, non-homogenized. So the cows were grass-fed. They're not fed anything GMO. They're fed the right diet. They're, according to natural design. And it is pasteurized in order to be sellable in stores, but it's non-homogenized, meaning the fat will rise to the top still. And then the best milk you can get out there. And in many states, it's legal to sell raw milk in stores. In many states, it's not. But it's grass-fed, organic, raw dairy or cultured dairy. That's the highest nutrition. And a lot of people that have dairy sensitivities can actually drink raw milk and not have any problem. Why? Because all the enzymes are there. If you're lactose intolerant, sometimes they can drink raw milk because it has all the lactase needed to digest or break down the lactose. And cultured dairy is even a powerhouse of nutrients because it has all those good added bacteria back in. So cultured dairy could be kefir, yogurt, could be cultured sour cream. It'll be labeled cultured sour cream in the store. Not all sour cream is cultured, but you have cultured butter. So you have good bacteria's probiotic benefits in dairy. It's a high nutrient dense food the higher up the level you go. Where's the best case for sweeteners? This is a tough one. There's so many sweeteners on the market, but the worst are really the highly processed corn syrups or the pure sugars or even artificial chemicals. Really, artificial sweeteners are just chemicals. That's level 1. Bump that up a little and you got organic cane sugar. At least you have the organic piece. Maybe it's a little bit less processed. Sugar alcohols from time to time could be okay. Different people respond a little bit differently to the alcohols. And then number 3, moving up the chain on a quality. Raw organic turbinado, a little bit less processed than the organic cane sugar. Organic maple syrup. Those are all moving towards this natural design, a little bit more like they would be found in nature. And then coconut sugar, very unrefined. Sucanat is just short for sugar cane natural. It's very unprocessed. And then date sugar as well. And then the fifth best is raw stevia, plant-based sugar, monk fruit, raw local honey. These all have histories, and these all have a nutrient density to them. A lot of times a natural sugar, like in level 4, level 5, and even level 3, have minerals, have some nutrients to them, and they don't impact the metabolic processes negatively as much as the level 1 and level 2 do. So if you're to make any change in your nutrition, in your pantry, in your kitchen, sweeteners, the food we talked about a second ago, and fats, those two, I would make these bump up to the highest level possible and exchange the processed, highly processed sugars for the natural, exchange on this slide all those processed vegetable oils with natural fats. You'll see an amazing impact on your health if you really just did those two exchanges. And so knowing that fats are super important, this whole piece of information on fats has really helped me personally, and I hope it will for you. So worst to best. Worst is margarine. It doesn't have a history. It's chemicals. Vegetable oils, highly processed, trans fats, and shortenings really produce all the negative impacts on heart health. They don't form hormones like they're supposed to. They cause high levels of inflammation. Inflammation is a root cause of every type of health condition. So the worst, chuck them. I don't even allow them in your home. A lot of times when we eat out for fried foods, the 3 things I say to avoid when eating out: fried foods, sugars or sweets, and breads and pastas. Those 3 things. So fat outside of your own home when you're eating in a restaurant, sometimes it's not the oil itself. Let's say a lot of restaurants use peanut oil to fry, or it's really how high of a temp they heat the oil and what it changes molecularly when they heat it to 450, 500 degrees. So moving up the chain in value, quality, non-organic natural fats, so just butter that's non-organic, coconut oil that's not organic, that would be under level 2. Level 3 is organic natural fats, or organic sesame oil, organic olive oil, organic butter. And number 4, even better than that, are local organic natural fats. They're raised right here in your community. And then number 5 are grass-fed. So the cows were grass-fed that made the butter. They're organic. They weren't fed GMOs. Anything that's unrefined, anything that's soaked nuts or seeds, that releases all the nutrition in the nuts or seeds. Avocado, those are all natural fats. So coconut oil, olive oil, sesame oil, ghee, which is clarified butter, taking all the dairy out and leaving just the fat. Butter itself, grass-fed butter, organic butter, and avocado. Those are great natural olives, or great natural sources of healthy fats. All right, let's talk bread for a minute. Bread is supposedly, historically, the staff of life. Why is there so much buzz in the last 50 years or so about bread being so bad for us? Gluten being so harmful for our health? What's happened? What are we talking about here? So on a worst to best scale for bread, it all has to do with, guess what? The tagline underneath is determined by how far it's removed from natural design. So how much of grains historically were processed in a certain way, and how we process grains today is so different. The 2 foods we've altered the most are dairy and grains. And when we work with clients, one of the first things most of the time we recommend a client do is eliminate grains and dairy. Why? It's not that they're not healthy. It's the majority of grains and dairy in our culture today have been processed so much that we've lost any of the nutritional value. And in fact, they can become very inflammatory. So it's not the bread is a good or bad. It depends on the ingredients, and it depends on how it was made. So the worst to best scale for bread. Worst is Wonder white bread. In fact, the whole glycemic index, sugar conversion index, measures every food based on the standard of what white Wonder bread is on the glycemic scale. So how quickly does white Wonder bread convert to sugar in the body? Everything else is based on that. So a lot of times when we're eating bread, we don't think, I'm eating sugar, but we really are. So level 2 is white organic. Yeah, step up. Level 3 is whole grain organic. Those aren't bad. A lot of times you'll see those bread options on the shelf. Number 4, now we're getting into some nutrient-dense categories when we're talking about sprouted grain. So when we sprout a grain, we're releasing a lot of the bound nutrients. We're letting go of the phytic acid, some of these enzyme inhibitors that are in the grains as a result, I believe, of the curse on the ground that has bound some of this nutrition, and it needs to be freed. And one of the ways we can free it is by sprouting it. So these sprouted grain breads are a lot of times in the refrigerator section, not always. And a lot of times they're not necessarily organic, but sprouted grains are a lot better, more nutritious for us than even just whole grain. Whole grain just simply means it has a level of fiber content that was left in the grain and not processed out. A whole grain, that's what that means. So going up the chain, so sprouted non-organic, then level 5 is the best. Anything sprouted or natural sourdough, that's what historically how people groups all over the world process their grains in organic. So level 4 and level 5, bread can totally still be the staff of life. A really great resource I'll share with you at this point in our discussion is Nourishing Traditions, and it's really taking people groups back to their roots of how they prepared foods historically and preserving the nutrition in a food. And it highlights 5 different nutrient-dense food categories. So the more we eat of these 5 food groups, the more literal amino acids, literal minerals, literal vitamins we're getting and putting into our body. And we're giving it the tools it needs to heal and rebalance, do all the metabolic processes to maintain our health. All right, so let's take a quick look at each of these 5 nutrient-dense food groups. Cultured dairy. What are some types of cultured dairy foods we can buy in the store or make at home? One is called kefir. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's dairy kefir. You can buy it at the store. There's several brands, and it's literally a cultured dairy product to add a good bacteria back into milk. You can do coconut milk kefir. You can regularly do cow's milk kefir. And then you can also flavor it. So you'll see strawberry kefir, blueberry kefir. The plain will have the least amount of sugar. Then you have yogurt. Here in the United States, we're probably most familiar with this cultured dairy food, and we have totally added sugars and artificial everything to yogurt, so just the yogurt itself isn't necessarily good for us unless it's an organic and very low sugar kind of yogurt, maybe a Greek yogurt, or it's plain. But sour cream, traditional sour cream in the store, or conventional sour cream, I should say, doesn't really have any probiotic benefit, but if it's labeled cultured sour cream, then it does have those good active bacterias or good active cultures of bacterias in it. So you want to look for cultured sour cream. There's several brands. And cottage cheese. Cottage cheese is a cultured dairy product. Raw milk cheese. We'll see some block cheeses in stores labeled raw milk cheese. That's a cultured, the enzymes are in there, the good bacterias are in there. Cultured butter and buttermilk. So butter can even have some probiotic benefit if it's been cultured. So it's adding those good bacteria colonies and allowing those colonies to eat the sugars out of dairy. So they pulls that lactose out and eats it. The good bacteria feed on those sugars and they put back into the milk this lactic acid, this good healthy probiotic benefit returns and replaces the sugar. So that's why cultured dairy foods are super high nutrient dense, very historical foods, been eaten for generations. We can buy milk kefir grains online at culturesforhealth.com. You can make your own dairy kefir at home, or you can also find some really good sources in the grocery stores around you. Sprouted, soaked, soured grains, nuts, and seeds, really the staff of life. This is how traditionally grains are prepared because the result of the fall and the reason these nutrients are bound. Wheat contains almost 100% of all the nutrition we will ever need. So that's why it's called the staff of life. It has maybe 2 nutrients that are missing out of wheat. So it's fantastically helpful if it's processed in a way we can gain the most from the nutrition. But when it's highly processed, we take all the nutrition out and we don't free some of the phytic acid and enzyme inhibitors and all the things that are in the grain, I believe, as a result of the fall, then we're not getting the nutrition that we need. So sprouted grains, sprouted tortillas, sprouted pastas, flour beans, traditional sourdough, something that's lacto-fermented, where the actual grain is soured, not just the yeast, and then soaked grains or cereals. A lot of this is becoming popular and more available in the market, and then you can also buy the sourdough starter and make sourdough yourself, or buy sprouted wheat flour blends and make your own. Grass-fed beef and pastured meats. There's such a difference from the CAFO conventional, agricultural feeding operations, what CAFO stands for. So grass-fed meat is so different nutritionally than CAFO meat. The omega-3s, we talked about that, ratio between omega-3s that are anti-inflammatory and the omega-6 fats are perfectly balanced in pastured meats. God designed cows to eat grass, and when they do, then their nutrition profile is different. Grass-fed meat has CLA, or conjugated linoleic acid, and it's very scientifically even proven to help in weight loss and help in cancer fighting. So that is present in grass-fed meat where it is not in conventional fed animals. So red meat can be helpful for you if it's raised correctly. So it has vitamin A, vitamin E, it has a heme iron source, which is super absorbable compared to the ferrous iron of a plant-based iron. And then it has vitamin B12 that's highly absorbable. So grass-fed and pastured meats, whether they're poultry or beef or bison, lamb is always grass-fed, those are going to be a whole lot more nutrient dense than anything that's raised in confinement that's fed grain or animal byproducts. So I will say now that a lot of scientific studies that have been published in the past that really downplay or shed a lot of negative information around red meat. Cut red meat out of your diet. You should not eat it. In certain health populations, maybe that would be true, but all those studies are based on conventional raised beef. It's not on grass-fed beef. So pay attention to what the study they're actually doing and what claims they're making, because if you're studying conventional red meat, then yeah, that's true. It's very inflammatory. It could be very health detrimental compared to grass-fed meat. Wild-caught seafood versus farm-raised, the same concept. If they're eating what they're designed to eat versus in a confined environment fed a certain type of food, they're going to have a higher quantities of omega-3s, they're going to have a higher mineral, they're going to have optimal mercury to selenium ratios. So some of the damaging mercury that's in some of these higher ocean saltwater large fish that have a lot of really good other nutrients, we're scared to eat because we hear, oh, we don't want to get all this mercury. Well, it's when sustainably raised and wild caught, then those selenium ratios balance out that mercury and it's not as damaging at all to the body. So wild caught seafood, pastured meats, sprouted grains, cultured dairy, bone broths are the next category, and it is literally a base for soups and sauces. The actual broth itself is made from bones and cartilage of an animal. So historically, this has been an actual powerhouse of nutrition when meat itself was scarce. It helps with detoxification. It gives us a broad spectrum of amino acids, minerals, collagen, joint repair, intestinal lining repair. It's a food as medicine for sure. So keeping bone broth on hand, whether you're making your own, there's some great simple recipes, or whether you're buying it from the store. With all the media coverage on bone broth lately, it's not too hard to find on the shelf or in the freezer section, but it would be labeled bone broth, not stock or broth, but have the word bone broth in it. And it's putting all the bones, all the cartilage, everything after you've cooked a chicken, for example, back into the pot, throw in some vegetables, some herbs, a little bit of sea salt, and let that simmer low for like 24 hours and you have your bone broth. Now, nutrition consumers and markets have come into this and said, hey, this is medicinal, let me just make this more marketable, and they've made powders out of them, and most of them are pretty decent. Ancient Nutrition has a great bone broth powder, and you can get it in different flavors. You can put it in smoothies, you can make healthy muffins or desserts out of it. So incorporating bone broth into your diet as a staple shouldn't be too hard or much of a really weird change to make. Just substitute bone broth for any broth in recipes. You could substitute bone broth for water in recipes even. And then you can also add it as a powder. Fermented or cultured vegetables. So in the United States, there's not so much of a staple of a cultured or fermented food, whereas other cultures around the world all have their own fermented or cultured food. It's just a staple in their society, but we don't as much. So when we think of cultured and fermented foods or beverages, we think, maybe sauerkraut or pickles. A lot of the ones you get on the shelf in the store are vinegar based. They don't have any probiotic benefit. So you're going to want to look for cultured vegetables or fermented vegetables that have just water, sea salt, and the vegetable. That's it. If that's the only 3 ingredients in them, you know they're lacto-fermented and they have all the probiotic benefits. So kimchi is a good example. You have all kinds of different vegetable blends in health food stores or Sprouts, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, those types. And kombucha is a fermented tea. Usually it's a black tea that's been fermented and sometimes flavored even. You've probably seen that in stores. And then you can always ferment condiments. There's a great resource, Cultured Food Life, Donna Schwenk. It's a membership, and she gives all kinds of great fermented cultured recipes. You'd be surprised at how many fermented and cultured foods you can incorporate into your diet for really very low cost. These are high nutrient density, high value, high nutrition for very low cost, especially if you make your own. All right, on to lesson 4, personalized nutrition.